affirmation that we're using this morning is, I relax and let God within do the work. How many of you are not relaxed all the time? Yeah, exactly. None of us are relaxed all the time. And so when we're not relaxed, that's when we can use something like this, and that's what we want to do, because whenever our minds and lives come into a point of turmoil or difficulty or challenge, the purpose of affirmations is to allow ourselves to come to an equalizing point of understanding the truth, and this affirmation is true. I relax and let God within do the work. And it is the presence of God within that is able to do great and magnificent things. The question this morning is, what am I anxious, tense, or concerned about today? And if you're not anxious, tense, or concerned about something today, just wait till tomorrow, because it's coming, And we have this idea sometimes that if we just do things right, if we just are good in some way, if we just have a right relationship with God or with our family or with something that we do, that everything is going to be all right. And in fact, everything is already all right. But circumstances and situations take place in our lives. And when they do, we begin to move through a process of thinking that moves according to our thoughts. And what do we say about thoughts in mind? Create after their kind. So thoughts in mind create after their kind. And so if we are to begin a day, or if we are to begin an experience in our lives and ask ourselves, what am I anxious, tense, or concerned about today? And allow ourselves to go to that place and to be there. And this is fundamental spiritual Christian teaching in a practical way. Jesus did this very, very, very well when he demonstrated to his followers that very affirmation in the midst of their anxious, tense, and concerned times. Remember when they were in a boat and there was a storm and he was asleep? And what did they think? They're going to die. We're going to die. And here he is, the leader. What's he doing about it? He's over there sleeping. And so they woke him and said, do something. And he rebuked them, and he also rebuked the situation. And when he rebuked them in the situation, whether he really did that isn't as important as what he was demonstrating. And what he was demonstrating was exactly what we're talking about this morning. What's our affirmation? I relax and let God within do the work. Just relax. Just relax. Let it go. We think that we have to solve the problems and that we have to be concerned about all kinds of things. And in reality, what we have to do and what we need to do is to be open and receptive to the guidance and the power of the divine within us. And when that happens, in our anxious times, in our tense times, in our worrying times, what happens? We don't have to do it. We don't have to do it. We allow that power to come forth in its manifold grace, and with it, the anxiousness and the concern does what? Just dissolves. And so that's what he did when he said, why wake me up? He rebuked the storm, bang down. What do you suppose he did? He went back to sleep probably. And he probably thought they should go to sleep. And if they'd gone to sleep in the storm, what would happen? Probably nothing. They'd have woken up and it had been perfectly all right. And so this issue of having to do something about something and having to worry and having to be concerned and having to be anxious, the reality is, and the fundamental teaching of this faith is that God and we are what? One. God and we are one. There is no separation. You see, we've come to believe that there's a separation between us and God and the divine. And one of the fundamental things that Jesus came to tell his followers and his people and the religious leaders of the day was that God is not up there, not only up there, but God is also where? Here. And that presence and power is always here. And it is always here within us and around us and between us. And because of that, if we can see beyond, as Mary Baker Eddy taught us, beyond the appearances of what we are anxious or worried and concerned about, then we see the truth. And when we see the truth, then we're able to think about the truth and not about the problem. When do you get the solutions to all of your most perplexing problems and difficulties? When you sit down and think about them and work through them and write it out and all that? No. Where do you get them? When you're asleep? when you're in the shower, when you're washing the dishes? How many of you have had a terrible problem? You didn't know what you were going to do. And you worried about it, you were anxious about it, you tried to solve the problem, you tried to research, tried to do all the kinds of things. And then you were in the shower, you're driving the car or something, and bang, you knew the answer. And you know why you knew the answer? Because your mind moved from the problem into the infinite. Then we know the truth. And what does Scripture tell us about the truth? It'll set you free. It'll set you free from your worry and your anxiety. It'll set you free from your illness. It'll set you free from your depression. It'll set you free from all of those things. And one of the things that we know is that if we can just come to that point of understanding and believing that and claiming it, that our lives can be so magnificently transformed. Now, when you do that, and I do that or anyone else does that, understands it and claims it, does it mean you're not going to be anxious, concerned, or tense? Does it mean you're not going to be sick? Does it mean you're not going to have financial challenges? Of course not. What it means is that when those things happen, we know how to deal with them. And we know how to respond to them. And so when we ask ourselves, what am I anxious, tense, or concerned about today, we begin to see what the problem is. What is it that you are anxious, concerned, or worried about? For Jesus and his followers, it was the storm. That's okay. Whatever it is, let it be. If it's a storm, it's a storm. If it's a loss, it's a loss. If something's happened in your life that's gone, it's gone. If you're depressed, you're depressed. If you're sick, you're sick. But now, that's not the truth. That's the circumstance. But if we begin to believe that the circumstance is the truth, then it becomes manifest fully and completely. And when that happens, we start to create, because thoughts in mind create after their kind. And everything in our lives is created by thought. The world was created by God, according to Scripture, out of his mind. Scripture tells us in the beginning there was nothing but God, and it was void. And he called it out of nothingness into perfection. And then what happened? Then his greatest creations, us, started believing what we saw. We started focusing on the problem. We started seeing these things as the truth, when in fact it was not the truth at all. It was simply an event. It was simply an experience. And even in the worst situation, that presence and power is there. But we have to reach out and claim it. And we have to know that it's there. And when we do, then everything melts away. And the affirmation we're using is, I relax and let God within do the work. Let God within do the work. If we let God within do the work, then we are guided and directed in the way that we should go. And it isn't because of our own failings. It is our own failing that brings us so often to the point of failing and being tense and concerned, and brings us to our most devastating times. The good news is that whether you relax or not, the presence and power of God is there. With limitless grace, with abiding guidance and direction, with substance and prosperity and health in the midst of every circumstance and situation. And the good news is that every one of us will come to understand that fully and completely. But it would be magnificent if we could come to understand it and realize it on this side of the life experience instead of on the other side. Because as soon as we step forth, it's going to be real clear. We don't have a doubt about that. But then we're going to wonder, my goodness, why in the midst of all these problems didn't I just claim that and understand it? And one of the things we say in New Thought is that little statement, let go and let God, is not complete. The statement is and must be, let go and let God direct me in the work that is to be done. Because you and I have to do it. We have to be open and receptive to this limitless power. And when we are, we will prosper, and we will be healed, and we will be lifted up out of our most difficult times. This week, we ask you to go home and ask yourself every morning, what am I anxious, tense, or concerned about today? And just take a minute to take a deep breath and affirm the fact that I relax and let God do the work. Do the work. And it just, as you do that and breathe it in and breathe it out and let it happen, No matter what you're going to face this week, no matter what you face in any day and a time in your life, whatever it is that you face, if we can just come grab hold of the reality that God is there in the midst with us and that we don't have to do it, because the limitless intelligence of divine mind and the limitless love surrounds us always.